And I am done. I just finished up the Blackest Heart, the second book in the Five Warrior Angels trilogy by Brian Lee Durfee. And oh my gosh, this book is awesome. This is one of the best books that I've ever read. Ever. It's absolutely mind-boggling good. If you didn't watch my review of The Forgetting Moon, the first book in the series, I thought that book was amazing. I said that that book was one of the best books that I've read in the past decade. And this book surpassed it in every way. It's just, I can't get over how amazing this book was. Every single part of this book just clicked in the right way. I knew this book was going to be awesome. The first book was maybe the best first book in a series that I've ever read. And for being the first book that an author has written, or at least put out. I think he said he wrote another book that he never released. But for the first book to come out, to be better than the titans of the fantasy industry, just fills me with so much faith in an author. But oh my gosh, this book is so good. You read this book, the first page left me with my jaw on the floor. I couldn't believe the revelation that was saved for that first page. It would be so easy for an author to drop the revelation that we got hit with for the end of the first book, to really end it off on that high note. But he saved it. And it was such an amazing experience. I've never been that floored that quickly in a book before. Normally it takes time to build up. And I kept thinking like, okay, man, now it's going to dip down. Now we're going to get into a slower kind of like world building pace. But that didn't happen. After every, this is a 900 page book. In every 100 pages or so, I would think to myself, is this book going to slow down? Because it puts the pedal to the metal on the first page, and it just doesn't let up. At no point does that pedal let up. It is intense and crazy the entire way through. And you might think that that would have pacing issues. You know, pacing issues would be evident if a book is a little too slow or a little too fast. Somehow, it raced away from the start and did not feel like it had a pacing issue. Now, it was difficult to breathe. I had to put the book down several times just to take in what I just read. My wife was wondering what was going on multiple times. She'd be like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was just had my hands on my head, just blown away by what I had just read. So, if you're looking for something over the top, crazy, amazing, epic, this is the book. I think this book is, I mentioned in my first video that there's a lot of books this book feels like it blends together. It's clear that the most direct comparison I can give to a book series is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. And it's easy to do that because they both kind of have that A Song of Ice and Fire, epic, multi-POV, grand scale to them. But they also both have this this idea that there's this past battle that happened kind of between good and evil, and now it's happening again. And there's this prophecy element to both of them. There's this magical artifacts element to them. And I've said The Faithful and the Fallen is my second favorite series that I've ever read behind Malazan. But this book took what that book did well on the prophecy angle and took it to another level. Prophecy is something that I really enjoy in a fantasy book. Normally, though, it's kind of a black and white scenario. You have a prophecy, and you have these characters marching towards fulfilling that prophecy by the end of the book. In The Faithful and the Fallen, that prophecy gets turned on its head about halfway through in a really cool way. And then you have this, it marches towards that second angle of it, towards the end of the book. This one flips it, and then flips it again, and flips it again. You're wondering to yourself, what is real and what is not real? And it's done in such an amazing way. I don't think I'm going to ruin anything by telling you some basics here, but there's this huge battle between good and evil many, many hundreds, if not thousands of years before the start of this book. And it's split off into multiple branches of kind of like religions into different parts of the world. They all have their different takes on that central moment, and they each have different prophecies that are similar but different. And so it's really fun to read through this because, you start reading it and you're like, oh, clearly this is a good versus evil plot. The good guys, the ones we're mostly following, that's good, right? Well, it's not. It's way more gray than that. And I finished the second book, and I don't know who's good and who's bad. I don't know if there is a good or bad. And I don't know if any of these prophecies are BS. I don't know if some of them nailed it. I don't know anything. And that's really, it sounds confusing, but it's just fun. So I love the way that the religious elements are played in this book. This book does a really nice thing that I like, that Malazan does really well. And it's this idea that women are just as badass as men. And, you have essentially two main parts of the world in this book. And one of them treats women in a really sexist, intentionally sexist way. And, I feel like people might read some of that first book and put it down and say, like, I don't want to read a sexist book. But this book is intentionally doing that. And it's intentionally trying to show that these people are messed up. The way that they treat women is horrible. And you have this other culture coming in constantly and questioning the women of this culture, saying, why do you believe this religion? Why do you go along with this? There's a different way. Women are just as important as men. They fill their army full of women. It kind of has this like World War II Russia vibe, where Russia kept drafting women into their military, and they had twice as many people as the other side. And that's true in this book. And it's really fun to watch these two different cultures playing off each other. In Malazan, most cultures, the women are just as badass as the men. You have a lot of other books where women play no part in the military scene, but it's fun to read this book where you have that dynamic playing off each other, where you have two different groups that treat them in a very different way. I mentioned in the Faithful and the Fallen series that I'm not a huge fan of like animals and pets in my stories. Not so much animals. I like mythical beasts that are like bigger than life. But I find that a lot of the times that like pets are brought into a story, they're trying to like hit this emotional impact that I feel like could be better done by having humans interact with each other. But there is a dog in this book that I'm not going to spoil anything. His name's Beer Mug, and he's the coolest animal in a fantasy series, bar none. He is brought up into these moments where you're shivering with excitement, and the cool factor is ramped up to 11. I say like shivering, and it's because there are many times in this book where I actually get goosebumps. I'm not that kind of reader that has these big reactions to books. It's very rare for me to shed a tear. It's very rare for me to actually get chills. This book evokes chills many times, and I cherish that it is able to evoke those emotions from me that is very difficult for an author to be able to do. I can count on one hand the amount of authors that have been able to successfully pull that off, and Brian Lee Durfee is solidly in that group, and I love him for it. There's this intentional aspect of this book that does this Lord of the Rings fellowship vibe. They even almost play with it. They're like, oh, we have 9 members. That's how much you need for a journey, right? Like, it's like clearly trying to evoke those feelings. And it does it in such a really fun way. This journey of these people, which is not the only plot line in this book, but it is one of the central plot lines. It's really fun to see this alternate take and a darker take on this Lord of the Rings formula that I really enjoyed. I'm going on and on about how much I love this book, and you just got to read it. You have to read The 5 Warrior Angels and get onto this hype train. He needs more readers for this series. This series should be huge. It's not. I hope that it gets there. It deserves it. It deserves your attention and your love thrown onto this book in heaps, and I hope you give it a chance. I go out of my way not to make any spoilers in my books. I'm going to put a little spoiler warning up there, though, because I have to talk about this moment. This huge battle that happens at the end of almost at the end of the book. It's not the last thing that happens, but it's the last big battle. And I'm not a big battle fan in books. I find that they're often done poorly, and maybe I'm just not a big fan of them. This book knocked it out of the park. There's this battle, and spoiler warning, I'm going to go into it, and I'll tell you when the spoiler's done, but it starts off where you have what feels like a mundane run-of-the-mill battle with a kind of cool element. You have like these two different continents, and on high tide they get connected by a little strip of land, but it's not for a very long amount of time. So you have this full army that is going from one landmass to the other, and it's like 10 miles long. The other army knows they're going to do this, so they place themselves out, like a mile from their continent, and they're going to make a last stop against this much larger army, and have this battle and try to stop them and drown them. And so that's fun, but it doesn't feel like this battle is going to be anything other than slaughter. The bigger army is going to destroy the smaller one. And I'm not going to spoil what ends up happening, and I am spoiling like a little bit of a plot line, but I don't want to finish it for you. But they start battling, and the water starts rising, and you have this added tension to this battle, which it's page-turning stuff. You can't get your eyes off the pages, and it's like you have this tension. These nerves are flowing through you for these characters, much more than a normal battle scene with like these huge stakes on the line. You feel for these characters and the stress that's going through them as this water is rising, and this feels like unbelievable, but it works. You have these enormous amounts of great white sharks that are flowing into this battle, just decimating people. So you've got this huge battle. You've got people that are worried about sinking with their armor on. You've got these huge great white sharks. And when it feels like the tension couldn't be wrapped up anymore, you have these enormous like sea serpents that come through, just wrapping people up, taking them down. These sea serpents that, they're mentioned earlier in the book, and a lot of fantasy books do this. They mention some like really awesome mythical beast that you might see from the prow of a ship, but you don't really see them in action. This book did that earlier in the series, and you're like, man, I wish you got more of these guys. You do. And it is crazy. It's maybe the best battle scene that I've ever read, and I highly encourage you to read through this book just to get to that point. The whole book's worth it. That book just hammers it home that this book is epic. This is a heavy metal fantasy book that delivers. Now, there are a few things that were weaknesses for this book. They're not big. I'm getting picky, but I'll mention them now. The weaknesses that I mentioned in the first book are still there. It's not heavy. The biggest one is a really small thing, but it's that they put the character listings in the back of the book. So when you're reading on an ebook like I do, you can't search for the character names because they're in the back. And you can't do a backward search on Kindles. So that's a little frustrating. But some of the bigger things that happened in this book is that I really wish there was a plot summary at the beginning of this book. John Gwen does that with his books, or at least his Bloodsworn saga books, and it's really appreciated. And it's more so needed in a book like this because this book's not big yet. And you can't go online and read a synopsis of this book. Nobody has it. So you have to either go back and read the whole other book or just kind of go in blind and try to remember it as you go along. And the author doesn't do an amazing job at filling you in about everything that happened in the previous book. I normally like that they're not like hand-holding you through, but in this case, either put that summary or do a little bit of like needless explanation of what's going on. It would be really helpful. There's too many cliffhangers in this book. Not cliffhangers that carry on from book to book, but it does that A Song of Ice and Fire thing where you'll have this big moment happen, something crazy happens, boom, switch POV. And you got to read several chapters to get back to it. I don't need that. I'd rather do the Wheel of Time thing where they talk and they go through like a stretch of characters and they go through like a decent amount of plot before they move on to the next one. The last thing that I wasn't a big fan of in this book is that the epigraphs. Epigraphs, if you're not familiar, are... Hi, sweetie. 1 second, almost done. 1 sec, just give me 1 minute.
Daddy.
Epigraphs are that thing that's at the beginning of a chapter, and it's like a quote that goes on the top of a chapter. And... What's up, sweetie?
What is this?
I'm doing a video for... Say hi to everybody.
Who are you talking to?
A bunch of people that are going to watch my video in a little bit. Okay, can you give me 1 minute?
Bye.
Okay, say bye. All right.
I'm there.
But the epigraphs are about this like religious text, and they're bringing up like these religious quotes. In the first book, it works really well. In the second book, it's not bringing anything new to the table, and I got kind of bored with reading them. So, as you can see, I need to wrap up this video, and I really appreciate you giving it a watch. Give the 5 Warrior Angels a shot. You will not regret it. So that's my video. Thanks for watching. Elaine, you want to say bye to everybody?
Bye-bye, whoever's on there.
Bye-bye.
I hope you have a poop day at your home and have a best day with poop.
Okay, bye everybody.